Assalamu alaikum and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us for this very interesting and important subject, which is around sustainability and the eco-friendly real estate. You know, what does the future of green buildings look like? And with all the amazing projects going on in Saudi Arabia, this becomes even a more important topic to discuss today. So let me set the context, a quick introduction of myself, and then I will move to getting our panel members to introduce themselves as well and get into an interesting discussion amongst the three of us. I am Mohammed Sierra. I work for EY in MENA. I lead our digital government and public sector practice across MENA region and spent a lot of time in Saudi Arabia. Before that, I started my career actually in the UK civil service as a public civil servant and moved out here about 20 plus years ago. I also teach innovation and digital at the Paris School of International Affairs, which is part of Sciences Po in France. I'm passionate about wanting to make a difference in people's lives, and what I do is connected to all of those things. Now, the subject we're talking about is obviously sustainability and eco-friendly real estate and green buildings, and we have with us three very important and interesting guests who are going to be able to share a good context around this subject from different dimensions. The one thing I do want to set the scene with is that built environment is contributing something like 40% of the carbon emissions around the world. And with Saudi Arabia looking to double or triple its built environment, we really need to be keeping this sustainability angle from a much broader perspective front and center. So let's start with first getting my good panel members to introduce themselves. So if I can hand the mic to yourself first, Nasra, to introduce yourself. And please also share with the audience something that you are passionate about in your personal capacity as an individual, as a human being.
Thank you so much. Ahlan wa sahlan, assalamu alaikum, and good afternoon, Riyadh. Firstly, I'd like to say, by way of introduction, so I have three roles. I'm the CEO of the Kenya Green Building Society, which is a non-profit membership-based organization whose sole purpose is to push for sustainability in the built environment. And this is particularly important for us in Africa because we are the youngest region and we have a growing population. And this then means urbanization is rapid and we have a young population that is looking for opportunities in cities. So the built environment is a key topic for me because it directly involves the development and growth of Africa. I also chair the World Green Building Council Africa Regional Network, which essentially, involves my work at KGBS at a regional capacity. And lastly, I'm also a member of the County Assembly as part of the Nairobi County Government. In terms of what I'm passionate about in a personal capacity, which looks into also my work, it's about ensuring that people live with dignity. And I think the built environment is an amazing platform for us to push for that agenda. Thank you.
Absolutely, absolutely. Peter, if I can ask you to do the same, that would be really great.
Yeah, and already inspired by a fellow panelist. My name is Peter Jameson. I'm a managing director and partner with Boston Consulting Group, and I lead the climate and sustainability topic globally with BCG around the built environment. So working on this topic every day, and that leads me to where my passion is. And very much, particularly here in the Kingdom, my passion is around taking all of that energy that we have around this topic and trying to bring this into something that's going to deliver impact from a sustainability perspective, but also something, and I'm going to use the word in the same sentence as far as sustainability is concerned, also in a business context as well, because I'm a true believer that these two things can go hand in hand.
Absolutely. And I think there's a great opportunity for Saudi Arabia to lead in this space. And Eduardo, my fellow panelist, it'll be great to hear from you as well, your introduction and what you're passionate about, please.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Mohammed, and thanks for my colleagues for the introduction. My name is Edoardo Geraci. I am a partner at the Boston Consulting Group in the Middle East, working in the region and especially in Riyadh over the past 7 years, mostly on the large infrastructure projects, so what they are so-called mega projects. Over the past 2 years, we have been pushing a lot together with Peters and the top experts within BCG the topic of sustainability within the built environment for exactly the reason you said earlier. 40% of the emission comes from the built environment. If you do a 80-20 perspective, this is where we need to set the initiatives and our efforts, number one. And number two, we have a 1 trillion opportunity in the kingdom to tackle the built environment sustainability topic. Now, in terms of what I'm passionate about, in my personal capacity, I have several passions. I think, obviously, as an Italian, I'm very passionate about food and football. I know the kingdom is a huge football crowd, but on a more deeper level, it's really about influencing decision that can stay for hundreds of years. And which better place in the world than Saudi Arabia to exercise this passion?
Amazing, amazing. So let's start with an opening question for each one of you, if you can answer it from your own personal perspectives. For this subject that we are talking about today around sustainability, eco-friendly real estate, and the future of green buildings, what is your perspective? The one thing that you want to start the conversation with. So if I can ask you, Nasra Freeze, if you can go first.
In my opinion, I think at the heart of the built environment is dignity. And so when we look at sustainability, really smart leaders, which I think His Majesty MBS is really leading the way, is realizing that if you empower your people, then you can create not just sustainable markets or investments, but generations of empowered people. And I think the built environment being an amazing platform with 40% of CO2 emissions in that regard creates an amazing opportunity for His Majesty and leaders like him to really change the game and empower their people. So for me, green buildings really means building in a way that looks after your health, maintains or preserves the environment around you, and also is mindful of your energy needs. So it's a no-brainer that for us to create the cities that we want to empower our people, we need to build in a way that is sustainable. And that translates into our cities and our country. And if we think about things in a way that is not just preserving as a way of helping our people, but as a way of unlocking finance, then the future is bright.
Yeah. Absolutely, and I think at the center of that is going to be the human revolution as well. Peter, from your perspective, what is how you see this, and what do you see as the main driver of this subject?
So I think, put simply, we are past the stage of commitments and rhetoric. We are at a stage now and in a decade of action. So what is happening at the moment is we have industries, we have value chains that are all trying to work out how do we act upon these commitments, these targets. There's money flowing. How do we use that money? We have organizations growing. How do we align ourselves around it? And I think my key point here is that we cannot work in silos. This is not about a mega project saying, I need 1 million tons of green concrete and just putting the flag up. It's about every actor in the value chain actually working together. And sustainability is a team sport. You cannot, as one individual, as one entity, drive the kind of transition that is required to take place. So for me, it's all about connecting, which is what this event is doing as well, but it's creating that value chain along.
Amazing, and I think the key takeaway from that for me is this connecting and collaboration. If we don't work as a whole, as an ecosystem, we will not be able to achieve what we want to achieve. Eduardo, for yourself, what's your perspective on this subject?
Yeah, in my opinion, everything can be summarized in value creation. So sustainability, we need to a bit go away from the concept that sustainability is just a cost. Sustainability can be a driver of value, not only for the environment and the communities, which is already something huge, but on top of this, also from a profit perspective and a competitive perspective, I think sustainability will give the opportunity to Saudi Arabia, for example, to really generate value out of it. So I really, and we work every day together with Peter and several colleagues in really changing a bit the perspective from a cost center to a value generating assets over time.
And I think absolutely we see this as an opportunity across the board in the kingdom, and this is one thing I think where there's so much investment going, it does really give an opportunity to put the kingdom in a position of becoming a leader globally, not just in the region. I'm going to change the order a bit. Peter, I'm going to start with you first because I'm curious about, you are coming from a region which is always been considered from at least a sustainable living perspective as a leading region, the Nordics. And it'd be interesting to hear about how do you see those best practices and good models of looking at sustainability and the comparison with Saudi Arabia, and how can we actually bridge them and make something even better over here?
And thank you for putting me on the spot there. It's never good to compare countries and regions because there's a lot of emotive between them. I think a couple of things, and I'll talk here about the opportunity that I see in the kingdom and relate that back to what I see in other parts of the world. Here in the kingdom, we have a generational opportunity to make a difference. And make a difference for 50, 100, 150 years and for many generations to come because of the amount of greenfield development that happens here. And that, in comparison to what we see in other parts of the world, is very different. There are a lot of these countries, particularly my hometown in Copenhagen, they're having to go back and redo some of the mistakes that they made 50, 100 years ago. Here in the kingdom, there is the opportunity now to make that difference. The second thing that I can see, and here in Riyadh in particular, I can see it taking place, is the ability to use some of these new and emerging technologies. So I'm really excited by some of the material developments that we're seeing. So replacements for concrete, which is highly carbon emitting. Some of those new technologies, I can see some of the organizations here actually starting to use those. The second thing that I think is exciting is the use of digital, and I can see, the banners around this room at the moment, this connectivity and using digital and data to help drive sustainability. So those are a couple of things that I can see moving around the globe, some of them coming from the Nordics, from my hometown in Copenhagen. But again, I go back to this point is, I don't like to compare Riyadh and the kingdom to other places because it is unique, and here is the opportunity.
Sure, and I think, as you said, it's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and it kind of hit me when you said that what we are building today is going to last for generations. And if we don't get it right now, we're going to live with those mistakes not for 1 year, 2 years, but we're going to live with those for hundreds of years, at least 50 plus. So we have to put this in our thinking. Coming to yourself, Nasra, I wanted to get a bit of a reflection from you of Africa. I know Africa's not been necessarily the leader in this space, but I feel there's been some clicks, some changes in mindset, and a couple of events I think have made that come about. If you can share your thoughts and where we are today and what is it that is happened that is changing the direction for Africa, and particularly Kenya, where you come from.
Thank you. I think last year was an enormous opportunity for Africa because for the first time what happened was the region came together and said Africa is taking charge of its narrative, so that climate, which is essentially also a development issue in Africa, is going to be led by Africans and also determined by Africans. So last year, Kenya managed to host a number of very key conversations. The first was the UN Habitat General Assembly in March, which was closely followed by the Africa Energy Forum. And the key highlight for last year was the Africa Climate Summit, which brought together the African region to determine some of its priorities from a climate lens. And then lastly, COP28, where essentially what happened, and this is particularly relevant for the built environment, one, it was discussed as a regional priority for the region. Two, housing was something that was prioritized because, as I said, it's rapidly urbanizing and growing. So affordable housing, or rather sustainable and affordable housing, was highlighted as a key priority area because we have 3.5 million Africans every year requiring housing, which is huge. Second, there was also the aspect of building climate resilience for the urban poor. With migration, you have slumification of, urban and peri-urban spots. So it means now we're looking at the built environment as a human empowerment tool and climate as a human empowerment tool, not just in isolation of the people it's supposed to serve. And lastly, I'd like to say that Kenya was a key partner of the Buildings Breakthrough, which is a commitment by nations to decarbonize the built environment. Kenya also committed to lead the conversation on utilizing sustainable mass timber so that we're using locally available local materials in building these houses and the cities we want. And I think also, because we talked a lot last year, the ending part was by leading, with an example of having Nairobi's governor certify his office as the first IFC Edge green government office in Africa. We want to communicate strongly that Africa might have been reactive, but now we are proactively looking to learn and work and push the climate conversation.
Amazing, and nothing better than leadership putting, as Peter was saying earlier, forward their first step and making that commitment a reality. I feel, Peter, you want to add something over here.
Yeah, for me, it's this point around leadership.
Yeah.
If you're a leader making a decision that you know is going to last for many decades to come, making a decision without all the facts is a very difficult step to make.
Yeah.
And what we need to do is not just educate, but we also need to encourage this place where leaders are ready to make a bold decision, not necessarily with all of the facts there, but a bold decision and willing to take a risk.
Yeah,
and we see governments do it, we see individuals do it, but I think that's what we need to promote to really accelerate what needs to be done.
I'm going to pull Eduardo in here. If I can, from your perspective, understand this whole concept around the rapid urbanization. How can we be doing this and balance the whole side of the sustainability as well? I mean, it seems like a conflicting or dichotomy situation where we're wanting to urbanize so much. What's your perspective on that?
Yeah, no, this is a great question. I think when we talk about urbanization and sustainability, we think about opposing forces, but in fact, actually, they are not. If you think about it, 2% of the land surface of the world, it's urban area and produce 80% of the GDP, meaning there is quite a high efficiency of use of resources. And another example that was mentioned in some panels, in a panel like 2 days ago, it's about the average American consume and emits 30% more than the average New Yorker.
Interesting.
So this is obviously because of the space of the flat where they live in, the transportation, the efficiencies in general, mobility, last mile solutions, public transportation, and so on and so forth. So the two aspects they in fact comes together many times. Now, obviously, Saudi Arabia is growing at a rate that is impressive and unprecedented, as it was mentioned. So definitely there are some challenges of faster urbanization. For example, the strains of infrastructures, congestions, emissions in general of houses, transportation, many other topics. Now, in my experience, based on the experience I have, I see like 5 factors in order to address these and balance these two trends. First of all, it's about thinking since the beginning, especially in greenfield projects, about an integrated urban development. And this includes thinking ahead about mobility, green spaces, space for renewable energy, and in general, a wealthy and well transportation of the people. Second, it's about the assets themselves. So to really leverage the best practices on eco-friendly and green buildings. So when you build something, make sure at the design stage, where 80% of the impact can be done, to implement and think about the best practices. Here we're talking about passive design, for example, district cooling, and so on and so forth, that make the building very efficient or net zero in the best cases. Now, the third factor is about, and we discussed sustainable transport solutions. So to really think about and leave space and encourage public transportation, last mile transportation, share mobility, and everything that will avoid for example, 90% of the people as of today in Riyadh to move with a private car. The fourth element is about a bit efficient resource and energy management. And here, obviously, we talk all about the technology, for example, that was mentioned in advance, to manage it from remote with technology and make sure that we consume less energy, but also in terms of waste and water, we really need to think about in a comprehensive manner. Last point, but not least, that was mentioned earlier, community engagement. Riyadh and Saudi in general is so rich of several communities. We need to make sure that the communities, they are not only taken into consideration, but they are included in our plan in a comprehensive and coherent way. Now, there are some examples in Saudi. King Abdullah Economic City have some of these elements we saw, so I think it's a good example. There are other mega projects that are thinking coherently about this, but overall, I think these are the 5 factors.
So I'm going to summarize that into the strategy when you're thinking about this should be centered around 2 key, I would say, center box. First of all, the experience side of things, the human side of things, how we are going to create these whole environments in a way that we will give a good citizen experience or a user experience. But second is keeping environment in mind and the sustainability angles. So we should be looking at managing and balancing in such a way, whilst we want to give a great human experience, at the same time we want to make sure we protect our environment as well. I want to come to you in terms of Kenya and Africa generally. What do you see as the key challenges to going towards a sustainable way of living, buildings, etc.?
I think because Africa is a reactive market, we tend to wait for the opportunity to present itself. And I think that mindset shift needs to happen where we proactively or aggressively go after the opportunities. And I think in the past, sustainability was framed as a cost issue and not an opportunity for us to unlock financing, to unlock the relevant partners. And I think with Riyadh, and the Riyadh project around greening Riyadh, and also the Saudi afforestation project, this presents, in my opinion, a key opportunity for Kenya to learn from Riyadh. And look at what opportunities, Green Riyadh is creating for this city. That way, leaders get to learn from other leaders in a peer-to-peer approach on what they need to avoid and what they need to pursue. Thank you. Yeah.
I think that's an important one, and there's a lot of great knowledge around the world and experiences. We don't need to reinvent the wheel, and often we start first before searching for any ideas of how others have maybe solved this. Peter, for you, I have an interesting one that I would like you to explore, because you kind of mentioned this in the beginning as well. The initial cost can be extremely high when you're looking at sustainability, the sustainable way of building your built environment. So how do we look at balancing that initial cost versus the long-term benefits of green buildings? Not easy to sell,
We're kind of getting down to the real core of the challenge here, which is how do you actually finance this? And at the end of the day, you're absolutely right. There are some of the new technologies that are going to cost a bit more than usual. What I would say, and the analysis that we have done, is that if you take the long-term approach, net, you're going to end up in a more positive place. The question is how do you deal with the here and now? And I go back to my previous point, and this is, you get the value chain to start bearing some of the burden of that cost. Now, if we all sit in a world and say, well, actually, we're going to have the same business models, we're going to end up with the same EBITDA margin every year and still make this transition happen. Nothing will happen. So what we need to do is share that risk and share that cost across the value chain.
And do you see intervention, or let's say from the policy regulating government perspective, do you see incentivization?
So at the end of the day, I think the speed of this transition will be guided by how quickly commercial organizations move and the boldness. And the second is how that is supported by regulation.
Got it.
If there is incentives in place, that will speed up the new economies that need to be created.
And behavioral change, of course, because we're talking about a mindset shift, not just about processes, etc. Eduardo, if we take this and build on it, and we look at it, that obviously at the heart is going to be innovation. So what are the key trends that you see that can support this drive towards a sustainable real estate, especially in Saudi Arabia?
Yeah, no, that's exactly the core of the question, right? What innovations? I think in terms of trends, what I've been hearing in many of our mega projects, of many our, let's say, clients, is mainly three things. The first is really as a topic, right? The first thing is leading the request of having net zero buildings. Now, obviously, this is not always possible, but in order to do it, to do a net zero building, or let's call it a very efficient building, you need innovation. And this starts, of course, from, there are two big parts of it. There is one component, which is building materials, which represent around 30% of emissions of the lifetime cycle of the project, and the other is operations. So the innovation always are around these two topics. One is the green materials, such as like greener concrete, greener steel, greener aluminum, and this should entail a collaboration between the client and the suppliers. And the other are more about the operations, where there is 80% of emission. And here we talk about, for example, district cooling. This is a big topic that now it is becoming the standards in the kingdom. Energy, renewable energy, either with the rooftop or with a solar plant, either operated or outsourced. So this is, I think, it's one topic. The second topic, it's about technology. So Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, domotic, all the smart systems that manages the electricity from one side, but also water, for example, water consumption.
I think we could go on for longer. I know we are now running out of time, so just to stay on time, I want to try and conclude this. And if I can ask each one of you to share your parting remark very quickly, what's the one thing you want the audience to take away? So if I can start with yourself, Nasreen.
I'd say that there's always an opportunity by investing in the built environment, because it's a platform for dignity, a platform for opportunity and prosperity. So if we get it right with the built environment and look at it as an opportunity for growth, then the rest is history. Thank you.
Great. Peter, yourself?
So when I look out into this room, I see leaders amongst everybody in this room. And my plea to those leaders in this room is be bold. Be bold with your decisions. Be bold with the direction you take. Because the decisions you make now are going to impact many generations to come.
I like that one. Think of the next generations in your decision making. And Eduardo, yourself?
Yeah, from me, very much linked to that. Actually, the enabler for decision making, it's to study, to include it in the strategy. Do a strategy. Don't oversee this topic. It's the topic of the century. Not doing it now will be a huge cost over the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years, and for the generation to come. So definitely think about that.
Thank you. I'm sure, like myself, we could have continued for maybe hours and really still not get bored with this discussion, and really insightful elements that have been shared by each one of the panel members. So I want to thank you for being here with us today, Nasser and Peter and Eduardo. Really appreciated your contributions. I'm sure the audience did as well. I want to give a big thank you to RFF, because without you, we wouldn't have been here, and thank you for inviting us. And the audience, for being here and basically giving us your attention, and hopefully you'll take something back with you. I want to just conclude by maybe sharing 2 or 3 insights or key takeaways for me. Number one, I think it's putting the kind of humans at the center, but still thinking about the environment that we live in. We cannot just do it from one perspective. The second, technology is going to be a major player, but we need to think about business models as well, and across the value chain, as you mentioned. If we don't look at it from a complete value chain perspective, we're going to miss an opportunity. And finally, it's a mindset shift. We really need to start moving and thinking in a different way. And as Peter said, it's the leaders that are here today and outside that are going to make the difference. If we do not put in our mind the thought process that we need to be thinking of the generations to come, and our decisions are going to impact our country, our people, we will miss a trick. And finally, we have an opportunity to put KSA on the map as the innovator in the built environment space. We really need to grab this opportunity and make it the best for us. Thank you, everyone. Much appreciated.